Hello, everyone. So again, we're a team of 4, and they just define what their roles are. So little just 1 minute history on Clace. We just came together as a team of professionals from a lot of science background and education and outreach. And I personally come from 9 years with UCAR-NCAR as education and outreach coordinator. And so Clace starts out of me leaving UCAR-NCAR, or even before then, out of my expertise and all the learning that I did and the growing as a professional that I did while being at the UCAR's Education and Outreach Office, and realizing that most outreach specialists or directors in all the labs and even CU were really struggling with bringing science to Latinos and the underrepresented communities. So Clace, acronym in Spanish, en español, significa Centro Latinoamericano para las Artes, Ciencia y Educación. So these are all cognates. You should understand what I mean. So in any case, the idea of Clace, being a Latin American Center for Art, Science, and Education, we were set to do up there and right then in many different directions. However, pulling together our team, we thought, let's just start with the dream of working with informal science education programs, and let's develop one. Of course, a lot of other people with more expertise and more background than we do maybe have done these kind of programs before. Ours is different because we have integrated into our curriculum the cultural outline that we call. So to explain that a little further, what we do there is any scientific concept, it has to be paired with a cultural experience. For example, if we're talking water, then we refer to Mayans and aqueducts around Mexico and how they dealt with, drylands and that kind of thing. So there was a storyline to it, and our program is total and fully bilingual. So whenever our facilitators, and I'll go to our program at Columbine, if they are not fully bilingual, at least there's a paraprofessional that's fully bilingual. So again, within the classroom context, the kids are going in both languages, and we'll explain some of what we do there to bring that out. There's also another big component that is literacy. So everything has to be connected with the writing and reading in both languages. So we make sure that that is also conveyed through word walls, both in English and Spanish, of course, and the bilingual facilitation, but also we go into a lot of arts and 3D concept maps and things to really bring that, plus our Clace journals. So each kid has a science journal where they have a corner where they do a drawing, they do the word wall, and then they do the defining of concepts of lesson learned. And another component is of course, the artistic part also. So we do a lot of games and fun activities to reiterate the literacy part of all of that. So to that end, this is kind of the curriculum that we have developed so far. And then before Mateo and I came together, and then we developed a curriculum that we presented to Boulder Valley School District, and especially and mainly to Columbine Elementary, whose director, and that school was mainly one of the first schools in Boulder County that this year had the early release science program going. Now, some of you are already updated. All the Boulder Valley School District will have the late arrival or the early release program starting next year, so that teachers can have more time to gather and, grow in their experience. So before I go in detail on how, we develop our plan or our proposal for Boulder Valley through the acceptance of Columbine Elementary principal and us working there with him, and we sat with him, we identified his needs for 380 children on the early release science program. Well, science, it wasn't science at the time. We came with the science. So in any case, we put together that proposal came through, so we have been funded until the end of the school year. So since last year, and we have been developing curriculum, lesson plans, and that's where I'm gonna let my team talk about what is it that they have specifically developed for these lesson plans, and then we'll go into discussing how the early release science program at Columbine implementation has worked. It's 6 months since October. And so what are the struggles, the do's and don'ts, and where we're going from here? So, Mateo.
So my background is in environmental education and protection. I was doing that in Colombia. and I was doing some grassroots work here. And when I got together with Marina, we developed the cultural aspect that has a lot to do with environmental stewardship and reconnecting with the earth. So Columbine Elementary is close to 80% Hispanic. It's a very interesting pocket right in the middle of central North Boulder that basically brings in all the Hispanic children of the surrounding communities. And what we're striving for is for these kids to connect to their roots, to connect to their Hispanic roots, and become empowered and connected with the earth. To do this, for example, just one of our lessons, they start out by sharing an ancestral chant that has been shared by communities on earth for over 5,000 years, all the way from south, close to Chile, in North America, and the information of the 4 elements, which is our curriculum right now. They share this chant together to feel a sense of community, get connected with each other, look within a quote-unquote spiritual experience, because we relate one of the elements, fire, with the human will or the spirit. So in sense of culture, we're having these kids look at the roots of some ancient cultures as well, in looking a lot into Mexico, into Guatemala, Central America. We do a lot of Inca work. We talk somewhat about Amazon communities as well. We focus a lot on the Americas per se, because we want to create this concept of unity of the Americas. And we also bring forth polarities, different concepts of masculine and feminine, of light and dark, of construction and destruction, of a sense of balance that the planet needs in order for us to be able to continue living on it and living sustainably. And we plug in elements of modern culture, look at how we're acting with the elements today, how we can begin to act a little more environmentally responsible, how simple steps we take, care for water. So we plug in elements of environmental stewardship within our modern culture. And in a little bit, I'll be explaining about the Eco Clubs, which is a project that we want to co-develop with CU.
Right, that's after we talk about
But basically, that's the culture. We want to plug in some historical facts, but ultimately, we want these children to connect with something inside of them that really connects them with the earth, and that brings in coalition these 4 elements relating to themselves with the earth. So the 4 elements we see on planet Earth, earth, water, fire, and air, are also in us in the same proportions. I mean, we are basically the earth. This sense of oneness we're bringing forth, and they're really, really interested, and it's
so it's been highlight of the program. And again, I'm gonna maybe now move to Barry. Barry has been asked to, as we go ahead and develop those lesson plans, he looks at them, he makes sure that the activities are appropriate for the different grade levels, and he makes sure that to levelize those, to review vocabulary, scientific concept address, and all of that stuff. And he also has been asked, we do all of this right now, where every facilitator on their dynamics, they fill a weekly report. So, Barry has been asked to do the evaluations of this program, and so far maybe you can talk to Barry what has been the successes of the program and what you see we can, before we move on telling them what the decision that we've made. So just the facts there.
And we might want to pass around some newsletter samples.
Oh yeah, I'm going to go to that in a bit. Yeah.
Okay, so I was made this connection with the Clace through BASIC actually, and in January of this year, I've been working with them with Clace since then, doing a couple of things. One being, as Marina said, getting started on the assessment students, and the other paying attention to the science within the curriculum. Just a little bit of background on that. This 4-element framework was the piece that came in and had. It's a nice organizing concept. We've been doing some things that I think have been beginning to pay off, and I want to talk about that right now. via anecdote because we really haven't sat down and analyzed all the data we have right now, so we can just talk about sort of what we're seeing going on. But one of the things, the concepts we're trying to get across in the area unit that I'm doing right now with the fifth graders I work with, that will be, fifth graders are a little bit ahead, so we get to sort of test things out on them and then pass it down and adjust it for the grade levels. It's sort of the idea that air takes up space. And we've done a number of activities, most recent of which was the old simple one of taking a plastic cup, taking a container full of water, floating a little piece of cork on top, and putting the plastic cup down inside. Well, we've been doing a number of things like that over a period of weeks, and at this point, the majority of the kids in the class, when asked what's going on here, say, oh, the air is pushing down the water. That, for me, is remarkable from a fifth grader. There are a lot of adults that are amazed when they see that. So this is first my anecdotal report of success, at least some of the curriculum. But we've had, we've been, the way this has sort of come about, we've been designing as we're doing it. The old building an airplane while you're flying it routine. So we've been learning a lot of lessons from this. Seem to be a lot of positive pieces. And there's simple things like when one of the instructors forgets to do the chant at the beginning of the lesson, the kids, aren't we supposed to sing now first? I mean, it has an effect of community building, has some effect of sort of changing the atmosphere from what they've been doing during the rest of the day and saying something different is going on now. It's been a very positive element. The fact that the classes are bilingual, I think, is important for all for a number of reasons. First, in the lower grades, there are a lot of kids that aren't fully bilingual yet, and so they need to hear it in both languages. But I think even more important, we see a different kind of attention being paid to what's happening depending on the language being used. And what I've been looking at, some of the informal articles on research I've seen going on right now, thinking changes depending on the kind of language you're thinking in. And I believe I see different modes of approaching things, whether we introduce it in Spanish versus English for these kids. And the idea for them to get it in both languages, for them to be able to go home with sometimes parents that aren't bilingual and talk about what they're doing in the after-school program in Spanish. So that part, I think, is also shown in a number of ways a very positive effect on the population that we're working with. We have sort of two levels of things now that we're going to be able to use as data for further analysis whenever we get the time to do so. And that is both reports by the instructors in each of the classes, which what they're seeing, and the kids' own writing and drawing in their journals. So I think we'll have a number of resources which we can analyze to get a better handle on the kind of science content that they're learning, how they're expressing that. I think the only other piece is we might talk about a logistical one. I know was a big thing for me. My personal background in working with elementary school kids has been always working alongside a classroom teacher. And that was great, but now I'm in there on my own, having to learn to fly, and I'm learning that I, along with the other instructors, it's not unique, are having to learn or relearn a lot of classroom management skills. So I think some of that sort of thing is our evaluation goes for the future training. We're going to have to get the staff in this kind of program of just those simple things that you do to control big groups. One of the sort of pluses and minuses of this program is that a large percentage of the kids in the school are attending these sessions. When they have early release, their parents can come and pick them up, or they can go home, or they can stay in these things. And we're getting a huge percentage there. That's a plus. The minus is, I've got a class of 40 fifth graders that I'm dealing with a paraprofessional help, but still in a classroom that's designed for 32.
Right.
We're pulling chairs in from nearby rooms and trying to fit around desks and all that kind of thing, again, is a lesson learned about the logistics of running these kind of things that will incorporate into our future work.
Thank you, Barry. So in any case, let me give you then a little of the structure of the program so you get a picture. So we move on what's pretty much what we're foreseeing and what's for the fall 2011, the school year 2011-2012. So when, again, you have the components of the that could make every lesson plan. We're going as we go. Our team of professionals, I have to mention, they're all masters or PhDs in science education or linguistics. So we make sure that whomever is facilitating the class has the skills and is also acting as a role model. So that's been very powerful right there. So we're integrating in the classroom already like the scientist, professional, Latino professional. Barry's one of the few, but he has a great bilingual paraprofessional. So we make sure that we balance that up, and each kid has a bilingual component, but also the role model. And again, when we say, yes.
It's totally after school, is that right? I apologize if I mixed it.
And this is the beauty of this program in terms of addressing the underrepresented. If this was an after-school program, then those Latino kids, we would lose 30% of them in the soccer fields. But since this is early release, and most parents are working still at 1 p.m., so, stay up until the early release will pick you up at the same time every day.
Everybody may not know what the early release is because this is something
sorry.
new EVSD is doing.
Oh, okay. So I'm giving that for granted. Sorry. So late arrival would mean that the kids, instead of arriving to school at 8 a.m., they're going to be arriving at 11:30. And early release means that kids, instead of leaving at 3, they still leave at 3 in this instance on the early release. They still would leave at 3, but their class periods ends at 1:30. So they are to stay until 3, and that period of time, both in the morning and in the afternoon, the school principal have to fill in with something. Right now, we saw on the news, they only have $10K per school to pay for whomever is going to take on this. Now, one of the struggles is, since there's a little option of the school salary for these kids to go home and do nothing, they stay there, especially on the early release or even on both ends. The kids have got to be there, but there's massive numbers of kids. So we have classrooms on the kindergarten levels are 45. There's 2 kindergartens, so there's 80 kids. And on each, from 1st grade to 5th grade, and this is again an elementary school for this matter, we have up to 60 kids in a classroom. So these kids are ready to play, not necessarily do science. So whatever we come in, we're being like, okay, we're going to have fun now. So it's a lot of hands-on. Maybe Barry didn't elaborate on that, but we've been playing about different formats. Should each kid do the hands-on? Should we do a demo? Should we work with 2-3 kids at the time? So we're trying to work with a ratio of kids that's overwhelming. Each classroom does have 1 facilitator only, but they may have up to 3 paraprofessionals, depending on not only the size of the classroom, but also how rowdy or the discipline problems that this specific classroom has. So the chanting, as Barry was saying, has helped big time to get them kind of, for example, Jenn used to facilitate and she would shut off the lights, and there was kind of meditation moment, and they responded to that. So the good thing on that is that, again, it's most Latino kids or the Hispanics, African American kids, and also a lot of the whites are in the school, in the classroom together. We bring the science and we build discussions literacy-wise around the science instead of about some other topic. So science becomes the topic of discussion and also the resource for art making and all this stuff.
Right. So this is going to be once a week in every single Boulder Valley school starting next year. So it's teacher planning time.
So that answers my question. My point
Exactly.
has to do with, in the past when I've worked with in elementary schools and have tried to incorporate spiritual or religious type stuff into the curriculum, I've gotten in so much trouble. I get in trouble for everything. Yeah. But even a simple like physical education sun salutation, for example, which is something that I was going to build into an energy unit with the sun, But I also want to bring the physical education piece in. I understand where you're going. I just am surprised you've gotten away with it, or what is your thinking on
Well,
this?
I remember when Mateo came in and he said, this earth chant. And I said, we can't use that
You
word.
can't call it a chant.
No way, it's earth
We don't.
songs.
We call it a song.
So, earth songs. So it's mainly
And even
kids.
the whole way you described it, you would get in trouble.
Well, we don't really, when we talk about spirit, we talk about will. We talk about our drive to act, our internal force that takes us to act a certain way. Are we going to become environmental stewards, or are we going to keep taking away from the planet?
Okay.
So we're not talking about follow me, this is a religion, we're all
Right.
just the four elements in that. No,
You're
no,
good
we-
or bad. No,
No, but the
nothing.
way you described it would not be acceptable, is my opinion, in the district, which is but what you just said now would be.
Yes.
Well,
So I
the
just
school
wanna know.
district, the superintendent saw this, so he okayed it.
So, I mean, one thing
in
we
that
can
sense-
go and talk to is about our framing on all of this.
Interesting.
And there are two
Right.
different frames that we're talking about that are really important. So one is the framing on structure of schools and how they're shifting, which is to give teachers more time to do preparation, or potentially to an excuse to pay them less. We'll see how that plays out politically in a budget climate of $300 million in cuts to K-12. Anyway, so it's an interesting sort of question. And then the other side, though, we'll say is, what is the nature of this activity that we're engaged in? And what I've heard is that there's this sense of play and connectedness and fun and even spirituality, but how that's sort of framed
Right.
really is sort of clever and important. So we can pull out sort of these different themes about that. And what's remarkable about this to me is that those two very different scales are totally connected.
Yeah.
And one of the differences, for instance, is that there are no teachers there because the early release. And because of that, downside 40 students, upside, you shut the door and it's you and 40 kids playing around
Right.
to create a common space.
In
So an
both
incredible,
languages, and
right.
we sing in both languages, so it's
Right. So anyway, incredible opportunity and freedom within that to explore a space. And
Exactly.
so this is even more liberating, I think, than after-school programs.
Yes,
which is what I
totally.
find.
Although it's like, the ratios are really high with 40 kids and one facilitator, I even found with my kindergartners, a room of 40 kindergartners, daunting, but if you do all sorts of classroom management, it's this fascinating challenge, because we really could do nothing about the numbers this time around. So that's another thing that we're experimenting with, that you find out if they all get something hands-on, they start making all this amazing
And we do a lot of
observations.
positive reinforcement using
Yeah.
the school's
It's really
discipline.
fascinating for me.
Yeah.
So you're going to do every grade, every week, at every school in Boulder Valley?
Oh, I love your question, because this is exactly where I'm going. Exactly. So,
But other than that, tomorrow the world.
So thank you for the question, because this is exactly where we split this road. We have realized before the end of the year already that it's a great opportunity, early release and late arrival. We now know the budget per school, and we know the budget of this program right now, having 7 facilitators, over 14 paraprofessionals, and that's a lot of money, which we have been given, and we've been honored to be able to test the waters that way. Now, we sit as a team, we're like, as you say, are we going to implement this in every school? It's impossible. Not with the budget that schools have. It's just not going to happen. So we've been putting our thinking caps together, and then that's when I'm going to give Mateo 2 minutes, Mateo, because we're running out of time. Mateo, one of the things that I was very interested in when I got involved with Mateo, see, that's what love is about, is that he came with together with an experience in a nonprofit organization that's both in Colombia and the U.S. So it's a 501c3, and what they do is sustainability education, sustainable education on the environment, and as he briefly referred. So OPEPA, that's the name of this organization, and this organization has an agreement with what we call, what do we call it? The Pan
Pan-American Health Organization.
Okay, with headquarters in D.C. So one of the things that I was really, Mateo has keeps bringing me materials from OPEPA, Colombia, especially when he came from his Christmas vacation. And one of them that he recently gave me, without even thinking, what we're thinking there, like early release and sign programs, the way we have it right now, is not going to happen. So how can we do? We already have learned some lessons. The kids are enthused, both, the communities, and this is a great window during the school day where we will not lose the kids. So, we don't want to lose the kids. What can we do to keep as many kids engaged, the teachers and the school, in saying, let's do something exceptional that brings a pool of kids together, and we can work on, it would be 5 schools, or 10 or 20. We could do, how many schools are in Boulder Valley? I think over 38.
Yeah.
So in any case, we could do 38 schools. But how would that look like? So a wonderful publication that Mateo brought on, and I'm just going to refer to it because I'll have him talk about that. It's the Eco Clubs, and how OPEPA with the Pan American Health Organization has the international program of Eco Clubs, and it's been implemented throughout Latin America with great success. And now OPEPA being, our partner through Mateo, on this program, I thought maybe this is the way to go, to, just come in and recruit kids from all grade levels, bringing some of the outline and components that we talked about on the program that we were just finishing right now. And so, Mateo, what are Eco Clubs? Maybe
so
just talk about.
Eco Clubs is an organization that was started in Argentina, and right now it's in over 20 countries and more than 550 eco clubs all around. OPEPA in Colombia has been the national promoter, and we have established in the last 2 years over 57 eco clubs. And what we do is we go out to communities, and we're funded primarily through private organizations who are working in communities on the outskirts of cities or in small towns outside Bogota with very high needs populations. And we recruit a group of children, and we evaluate what environmental concerns they might have in their immediate communities, be it taking care of the water, or doing a recycling program, or a composting, or cultivating some food, creating some sort of sustainable project within their community, which is youth-led. It's a democratic organization. It's youth-led. It's mentored by somebody who's a little bit older. And
CU student teachers.
That's the idea here, would be mentored by CU undergraduate student. And we've gotten trained by the International Organization of Eco Clubs, and now in Colombia we have several trained facilitators. So the idea would be to bring 2 of these facilitators from Colombia to train CU students so they can become promoters of eco clubes here, and not only target schools, but possibly target communities of immigrants and community centers as well, just so we can have sustainable projects that have immediate impact within the high needs communities in Boulder County.
And one of the great things about is that this kind of eco clubes, the beauty of it, that we have that idea all along, is integrating, people like your museum and expertise and materials from people that has done wonderful things, which is one of the basic, foundation is let's come together, let's do something wonderful. Everyone it's an expert on X, Y, or Z. Let's just tap into the community, bring the tile, the gluing agent, and let's just do something. Where everyone is working together. And so this early release and later, it's just a perfect window for all of us to do something. One of the things that also, not only bringing outside stakeholders that I'm thinking about, and I remember having a great meeting with a good friend. He leads the education funding in the Inter-American Development Bank. So these are the kind of projects that we could go to, because they would give funding to the Latin American agency who, being here, so we could establish a collaboration. Just imagine CU students being able to have some sort of, through the Eco Club, some sort of of, we have the Colombian coming here for international training, so our students go with the excuse of the Eco Clubes down to Colombia. So, and the endless opportunity of the network of all the 27 Latin American countries that we could set up something, little program like Eco Clubes, and it would be like a more international or the Americas kind of movement. So CU could be a great leader, and we could position ourselves.
Metaphor, love it.
So,
yeah,
so in any
an
case,
opportunity to add the eco clubs themselves, so that
that's
the
great.
activities
I
can go
love
out
this
there.
idea. I'm turned on by this idea.
oh, I'm glad to hear.
Yeah.
Because I was turned on when I saw the little booklet that Mateo brought. I'm sitting there and I'm just thinking, oh my God, it's right here. This is what we have to do. So Mateo, I tell him, well, we need to know through OPEPA if this is something we can do, and then we know we're certified through this international organization with, again, what's...
So it is consistent with some of our flagship initiatives as
organization.
well. Many of our flagship initiatives here on campus. The kinds of things that we're moving towards as we move into the future.
So again, this is kind of, I think, race to the top, out of the box kind of ideas that we could certainly, if we were to review together, come together, put our minds together.
Absolutely.
I think it's just a great idea of everyone, tapping into, again, I just keep reiterating what a great opportunity to come into schools. We're not asking for those $10,000 per school, but a little component of that so we can run an eco club. And, just thinking out of how this could look like, I can imagine, Kathy taking on the leadership of one of the eco clubs, and whatever a stakeholder resonates with this community. Say I'm an expert in biology and gardening and that kind of things, and there's a school particularly interested in developing that, so you are the natural partner for the school.
But if you go to the scale that you described, it seems to me that it would have to have a more formal structure built in, rather than a kind of an individual idea catered
Maybe
notion
so.
like you just described.
Maybe so.
It would seem to me that it would have to be built into, for example, the teacher certification program or some other experiential learning program on campus that would form, that would be more, it would have to be absolutely
That would be
formalized.
ideal, because one of the things as you prepare the professionals on the future, on all the climate change and global warming and all this education component that we want to bring, these are the kind of professionals you want to bring out. They have been on the field, they've done the work. I mean, even if they have been given the opportunity to go abroad and have that exchange for a common goal. So I just think it's, again, you guys are more of an experts on that than I would ever wish to be, but yes.
I'm interested in what you said about the Eco Clubes being democratic, which potentially is a bit different spin on this, right? So the kind of traditional thing of a teacher coming in and doing something, and the kind of structure Valerie is imagining is certainly essential there, but it's not clear that's a fit for this. If the notion is that the kids are actually coming up themselves with some locally grounded kind of project that they're interested in.
Well, that's how it's traditionally worked, that the kids establish what the needs of their immediate community are. And if we're going to work, for example, just with schools in a formal environment, we could establish some general parameters of composting or recycling or zero waste or other initiatives.
But that's pretty different, though, right?
Yeah, that would
yes
be
and
a
no.
little different.
I mean, so, love the question, Clayton. I think you're right
Yeah, it's
on.
a great question, yes.
And I think that the existing structures largely prevent democratic action. They're not set up to support, to drive democratic action in our schooling system, by and large. That doesn't mean that they will necessarily prevent it. What it means is that we have to be clever about the structures that go in. And one of the ways by which we can create programs to empower children and undergraduates, paraprofessionals, and the professionals themselves for creating collectively designed activities is to use the existing structures to allow for enough space for people to move around to then make choices about action around the way. So, for instance, it can't be a raw democracy in the sense of asking the kids, what is it that you want to do in science, if they don't know what science is, or if they don't know, there's a level of having a democracy, and there are a couple of great models around these kinds of activities. So the point is that we can be clever about it. Yeah. We can draw in other folks. I'm sorry that Chris Gutierrez...
I don't want to give up the democratic idea so easily, though, because I wanted to actually make a suggestion about it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if people know Mike Cummings, who's in political science at Denver. So as far as I know, Mike hasn't done this kind of thing in the science sphere, but he's all over the democratic aspect of this in the sort of socio-political sphere. He's been doing a lot of stuff in Denver, actually, which is democratic and is based on the notion of the kids actually identifying the issues they want to work on. So I'm inclined to agree with Noah that it could be, particularly on the scale that you're contemplating, that it would probably be hard to sort of make the whole thing get up and running this way. But I think it would be good to keep this as an element of it, and Mike would be able to advise on how the real democratic aspect is compatible or can be made compatible with what schools are doing.
I think another thing to keep in mind too is this isn't just at elementary schools, this is middle and high school students too.
Right.
And so while they're not as likely to stick around at their schools, they're potentially also mentors or people that could be mentored by CU students. And as students move out from their elementary schools, I think that's where some of the democratic stuff could come in, is having the older youth too identifying.
Mike is doing it in grade school. And there's a whole story about it, which is really interesting. So Mike argues that our attitude in this country towards democracy is really broken, right? So we have a system of rearing children which is completely undemocratic, and at a certain magic year, we expect them to become participants in the democratic system. And of course, they don't become that mostly, right? And his point is we shouldn't be surprised, right? So instead, we should have an educational system which actually has democratic action built into it for the kids, so that by the time they become official members of the polity, they have some orientation towards it.
Hear, hear.
Yeah.
So actually, and especially this population of students that we're addressing, which are historically marginalized,
Right.
both within our school system. And this is, I mean, the great damage that happens in our school system is for underrepresented populations, Hispanic youth, what ends up happening is they do learn something in school, which is they're not supposed to be participating in society.
Right.
And so this is a good opportunity for us to shift the nature of that dialogue and provide agency. And I totally agree with you, and one of the ways that we can do this, of course, is to have the children build the nature of the organization themselves.
Exactly.
And ultimately sort of own it and run
Plus,
it. But-
plus, I need to add, Noah, to that, I'm sorry to interrupt,
No,
is
please.
a great opportunity that we have with a program like this is to include their parents and the
Yes.
community at large, which is a struggle with mostly, city leaders. And so just imagine the city of Boulder, they would just be pleased to see that there's a program where we can really build a sense of community and have this diverse communities not be so, kind of rejected and shy about jumping in and being a part. It's different than having a 29th Street Mall kind of nice exhibit versus having kids being the stewards or something. They will come and definitely be a part of it. So just to think about that kind of end to this idea. Now, we certainly are happy through Mateo especially and the OPEPA Executive Director to, of course, make all of this if this is an idea we would like to sit down and discuss further and see what options. We on our end are really prepping and laying down the foundations to do it. We would love to explore this through CU. We think it's a natural and wonderful fit. And again, tapping into Boulder Valley and that wonderful opportunity to really have those kids where they can go anywhere, and we can really encourage those kids that would otherwise just not want to do it and play soccer, we have them there. It's like, it's a great opportunity for them to be inspired and us to take on what we like best, is massage those brains and get them be a part of something exceptional.
And I think if the kids, building on it, if the kids come up with the structure and the project and so forth, then there's huge ownership, and that even ensures sustainability.
Exactly.
Even more so than,
There's nothing like these moms like best and
yeah.
go support their kids.
But the other thing I just wanted to say is, and this is what I like about early release programs and coupling with this, what I like about what Valerie had mentioned with the university, and I had just spoken against, just to be careful in response to Clayton's, there exist large-scale institutional structures that can support what it is that we want to do. We have to be careful about the nature of that because these systems were not set up necessarily to do this. However, they exist, and we can use the structure of those systems in really productive ways, in ways that there's a lot of language and rhetoric going around supporting, such as Flagship 2030, the mission of the university, going out, being international, focusing on experiential learning. Serving Colorado in the Nation is a new sort of push, and we should turn this to Serving Colorado Nation in the world.
Yeah, I should.
As we go.
With full, well, I mean, we want to capitalize on those structures with full understanding that whatever programs we penetrate, whatever CU programs are penetrated by this model are going to look very different in 10 years.
Right.
They won't look very different tomorrow because they have to look suspiciously similar to things that we already have. But the unfolding idea of change would be built directly into any effort that I would be involved with.
It would only be enhanced.
See,
if you're
Valerie's
involved.
already involved.
Oh,
See?
yeah.
All right.
I'm so into it, I can't even tell you.
So, it would be up to you. I don't know if you have more questions. We certainly, again, we could elaborate on the different components. We're open to discussion. You can email us. We'll give you guys our cards. But again, maybe as we leave today, the question would be, is it something worth, on your end exploring? In what ways? We certainly are planning to setting or getting ourselves set to go and make some fundraising events and things to really get at least one eco club. We would certainly be more ambitious in that sense, and that's why we would love to tap into CU. We think it's just a perfect match. So, yes.
Does anybody have any questions? Anyone?
Okay.
Anyone? Valerie? Teasing.
No, I know. I'm like one hand's coming down and the other one's going up.
It's all right. I got 3 questions and only 2 hands.
I know.
All right.
So in order to keep no one from asking too many questions, I shall be the one that asks. You mentioned a bunch of data. Somebody mentioned data. Who's got data?
He's got data.
We have resources to pull data from. The teacher right now, facilitator reports and student work.
And our weekly newsletters that we're passing around.
And journals there, every kid has a
And we
journal.
have the journals.
So it would be really nice in the pilot years. The best thing, in my opinion, from my perspective, that you could do for me.
Okay, let's see.
If you want, if I could be most helpful in this program, would be to try to create a reasonably bulletproof argument about something that, for example, NSF and other programs would be interested in.
Okay.
I think that is critical in order to engage folks in imagining, oh, sure, everything sounds like a good idea, but give me some kind of data that looks normal to most people who are in power that we could actually...
Well, as Barry indicated, we're having those weekly newsletters that really sum up the activity that each of the week and the highlight of the different activities. And also we brought the company like the Globe. We were part of a campaign until last week, and we've been bringing other resources in. So we highlight that on our newsletter also. And we have those weekly reports. We have the students' journals, and we have, of course, lots of pictures. I think we're going to be tapping into those, Valerie, by the end, and then Barry and I and all of us will sit down and. So maybe maybe we can give you guys a heads up once we wrap up the plan and we have more of a solid foundation on the eco clubs ideas or eco clubes.
Eco
So
Club.
I do-
Eco clubes. Mateo says no English. Eco clubes. So.
So what is your anticipated date of wanting to, what are you thinking, sorry.
Right, no. I mean, the question is what are the scale
Why
and
are you
structures?
laughing at me?
Because you're ready to get going. You want to do this today.
No, I'm trying to imagine, because I have an idea that I'm working on as well that will peel out in the next 5-6 years,
Okay.
and I'm just curious. This would fit really well.
Oh,
It's
nice.
shockingly well. But the question is, what are your? Are you thinking?
What are the goals, though, immediately for?
Okay, here are some of the goals. We have some money, so we be able to some rollover money because we make sure that we're not totally, dry. So with that funding, we're again, the first thing we did is identify what we're going to do for next year, knowing that 380 kids simultaneously, it's not going to happen in each school, and it's not going to happen. So we have some funding, Valerie, and we hope, fairly soon here we have an internal retreat to talk about, recap But the next step would be at least talking to a couple of principals outside of the principal we're already working with, and pick their brains also. How would you like this to happen in your school? And hopefully, if we will, power of intention is out there, we will get a lot of schools interested. And so we're hoping that with some of the funding that they have and some of the funding that we have, we could get set to starting implementing something with some schools, a certain number of schools, by the fall. So by the fall. So
and an important part would be if somehow we could get CU students interested, if there is a group of CU students who want to become these Ecoclubes mentors, so we can start figuring out if we're going to bring the trainers from Colombia, and what would be the best time, if it would be right at the beginning of the school year, or...
we would provide that funding in terms of saying, okay, we say we bring the trainers from Colombia who are certified by PAHO, Bajo, and so, we would make that happen, but, then CU brings the students and we take care of the rest, and we could do a collaboration there in identifying X number of students that are interested and fit nicely, hopefully bilingual.
I mean, the whole framework can be a pilot, but a very well evaluated pilot project that with the full intention of how where it's going to go in the future.
Oh,
So how do you
How
do you see the bilingual component working in schools where there are not a high percentage of students who are Spanish speakers?
Well, if the interest of the community is not bilingual, they don't want it, but, most schools in Boulder Valley, there's at least one or two, and then it would be bilingual in every school. I would not anticipate an all-white kind of classroom unless you go to the private sector, like community country house or something like that. But in any case, we would have the bilingual component.
Okay,
So,
great.
But I think that the beauty of it is also sensitivizing or whatever the Anglo kids to the cultural part of it. So this is a diverse community, and it's already, we've been seeing it in our classrooms. We've had white kids saying, "I don't speak Spanish," and I said, "That's great that you don't. I hope that you learn with us." And vice versa. The very Latino kids saying, "I can speak English." It's like, great, don't forget your mother tongue. So we make it like relevant to everyone. This is great to be, you are blessed by a bilingual program. So that's how we foresee, Kathy, the working and the cultural, Noah.
So I have 3 questions, but I can follow up many offline. But is this in addition to, or will the Ecoclubes be part of the early release program that Clace is doing, or is this in addition?
Not right now. We're going to wrap up this program at Columbine. We have talked about for the later 4 weeks of the program, we're going to insert more of the idea of sustainability and stewardship and things like that, starting with Earth Day in 2 weeks. Kind of explore before we end the program, get some data and some response, and we could say, oh, they really loved it. And then, that would be... But the idea is next year, since again it's too expensive is just go to the school. That principal might get anyone else involved, hula hoop or whatever, but some of the funding also goes to the eco clubs. So while they have the babysitting, programs that are going to come to the school anyways for an early release, because we could not have 380 kids in an eco club.
Right.
Because unless they give us the $10,000,
Or maybe the Ecoclubes come out of the early release programs too, which is to say a subset of the children participate.
That's the idea.
Ownership,
That's the idea.
Then
Noah.
start
Exactly.
to create this. What I'm wanting to do is to think about making less work by coordinating these efforts along the way,
Yeah.
and then we can have sort of a more identified programming activities for us to be offering on this end. I think there are
Exactly.
many different programs by which we can do some brainstorming to coordinate students.
Exactly.
So did you just say that you think that not considering the current program, the Class A separate, that's not as good of an idea as making it more continuous?
I think it's nice to have the modular, but you might as well have the modular set up to link with one another from the
agree.
beginning.
Exactly.
So you
And
know
it's
the
proof of
children, you know the
concept.
parents.
It's easy for us to talk about more proof of concept. as well.
And I think that's a win-win situation, and that's how collaboration should be. Where.
So, and then the other thing is you can take this to schools, and this can be an incremental development along the way, which, eventually we can start scaling. Like, So, and we've chatted about this a little bit, but to be explicit, we have several courses here at the university and several programs at the university, some of which are the courses by which students learn by participating in programs such as this. The Teaching and Learning Physics class will have students who will participate in this next year, I'm sure, because this would be so fun to do. The noise program would be an ideal program for this, potentially part of the LA program, potentially part of Step 1, Step 2. We've tried before, and there are challenges for the Step 1 program, which is the recruiting program for CU Teach, to have an informal science education component. I personally would be excited about it. I know there are limitations and challenges about that, but
challenges are there to be overcome.
We're not going to be under the wicked eye of the mothership next year.
Still up at 56 minutes.
No.
So again, Noah mainly he has our contact information. I think a lot of you are part of BASIC, so through BASIC you can access us too. And Noah, I would leave you and Valerie, you guys, to kind of put your heads together. We're open to discussions, and if you are, I'm open to also learning about some of the LA programs that we could, and again, it's just, we have the summer ahead. That's a good time. I'm ready to work. I don't know if you guys, but you can throw things at me. I'm ready to take on it.
I think what would be helpful for us is to have specific requests of this community, or ask us to help shape what those specific requests are. So there'll be a subgroup of us that'd be willing to meet and say, all right, this is what we think would be good, and let's come back with that. But then to all of the DBER or the STEM community, STEM education community larger at CU, we can put out a call and say, here are internship opportunities that are available, and we want to. So, we had this last time, but too short of window. Now we'll start doing this in advance.
Well, that's one model, but there's a more intentional model where, one model is to say, here are these opportunities, who wants to buy? Another one is to say, let's build a program, and that doesn't have too many cooks, But then again, this is the classic inclusion versus exclusion argument.
And it will be something that we should do fairly fast, because if say you guys say, yes, we want those student teachers, remember that this is a program that they need to be certified by a ECO Club facilitator. So we would have to, that would be part of our budget.
That would be built into the whole program.
Exactly. So we make sure that we're ready to go by the fall, and I
think we want to do both Valerie's approach and my approach.
Perfect.
So we want to have a core where we know there's a dedicated activity that's running to make sure.
And I like that idea.
And then open it up to say anybody who wants to additionally participate.
Good idea. We really do need to get.
And just basically say we're going to do it, and then here's the team that's going to go.
And just on the side, anyone who has worked with me for a while or has known me for a while, I have a great connection with Hispanic leaders in Denver and all around. And a lot of these leaders, they have funding. They want to fund something wonderful. So this is also something to think about. It's not only NSF or NASA, the funding agencies. There's a lot of the Hispanics who really want to see some stewardship bring up to the community. So something to think about in more of a funding source. So newsletters. Whoops, sorry.
I just kind of.
And Ed, by the way, is our tech person at Clace.
Thank you. So this is all happening at a school. Are you guys in any way comparing the outcomes of what you're doing to the outcomes in the classroom at all, or are those completely separate things?
At this time, we have again the speediness, if that's a word I can use. That we were requested to develop this program, as Barry was saying. We're doing as we go. It was out of their need to do something now, and that principal wanted some sort of an intervention in the school instead of just bringing anyone doing hula hoop, whatever. And so, in that sense, again, as we're going as we go, this is something that we're, don't have much
Do you know if like
data.
informal science projects in general are
Well, we know
judged by how?
we know through the school principal, we know that each science teacher, what they have through the standards on each grade level, and we're kind of tapping into what they are kind of doing. Again, since this was so fastly implemented, it was impossible to really try to tap into first grade teacher and second grade and make sure that we were just an extension of what they were doing in the classroom. I don't think that happened, or we don't really know if that happened. And again, we focus on curriculum.
But I think
Yeah.
measuring informal outcomes is a pretty new area that people are trying to
I mean,
address.
can you just
and
look at the
figure
grades
out.
of the students who are in the informal thing, or?
It's hard to, right, so there is a fair amount of work on this. I mean, most recently is the National Academy's report on informal learning in informal environments, which is sort of worth our looking at and revisiting along the way. Bottom line in this is that there are generally different goals associated with informal programs. So that isn't to say it has negative or no or negative impacts. In fact, there are instances of positive impacts, and there are programs that are demonstrated to improve the school-based achievement of children. But that's not necessarily why they're created. Which is to provide more opportunities for students to engage in activities in more depth, to take ownership, to shift identity, to incorporate a more holistic approach.
And the leadership
And
part.
the leadership component of the children.
Right.
So I don't know how we commodify that in a bubble sheet, which is what most forms of assessment are in that formal sector. But that said, we should be sensitive to it, and you're right to say ultimately that's something that we can sort of take a look at.
Well, unless any other questions, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.